Welcome back to Freedom Fridays. In this episode of Freedom Fridays, we're continuing our discussion on a plan for spiritual growth through the book of Ephesians, and we are in chapter 5, beginning with verse 25 in this session. And it says this: Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. Now there's a lot there, and last week we talked about 23 through 24, where we were talking about the responsibility of the wives, the role of the wives in relation to the husbands. Now we're talking about the role of the husband in relation to the wife, and even greater in relation to Christ, as we were with the wife as well. So husbands, love your wives. Now remember, love is not this touchy-feely, warm-fuzzy emotion, but it is a choice of the will to put someone else's needs before your own. That's what biblical agape love is, and that's the love this is referring to, where you put someone else before yourself. And so he's saying here, husbands, put your wives first. They are submitting to your authority. You, however, need to put them first. So much so that he reiterates, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. So it's not that just like Christ had these feelings and emotions and fondness for the church, but that he gave himself up for the church. And in the same manner, husbands ought to give ourselves up for our wives. So we're putting them first before our needs, just like Christ did in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was praying and he said, Father, if this cup can pass from me, not my will though, but yours be done. That's the attitude. The attitude is put someone else first, just like Jesus put us first before his own desires, before his own comfort, before his own benefit. Instead of doing something for his benefit, he did it for our benefit. And does he benefit from it? Sure. Do we benefit from putting our wives first, men? Absolutely, positively sure. Why? Why does he say to put your wives first? The same reason that Christ put the church first, so that he might sanctify her. Sanctify is to make her more like Christ. That's the goal of Christ, making us more like himself, making us more into the image of Christ. That's the whole purpose of the dwelling of the Holy Spirit working in our lives. That's progressive sanctification. That's Romans 8:28, all things work together for good, which is explained in verse 29, to make us into the image of Christ. That's what the job is. Husbands, you are to put your wife first, even in her spiritual needs, so that you might sanctify her, if possible, that you might help her to be more like Christ. That is your number one job as a husband. As a man, your number one job is to be more like Christ. In the process of that, as a husband, your number one job is to make your wife, and by extension your children, which we'll get to, more like Christ, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. Now, that is not something that we do, men, for our wives. That is something that is a reflection back on what Christ has done. He's the only one that can wash her clean and make her, as far as God is concerned, righteous in his eyes. We, however, can encourage her, can direct her, can do things that point her to being more like Christ. That is our job. For the purpose, in verse 27, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. Men, as husbands, it is our job to help disciple, grow our wives so that they, as we stand before God, that we can present her in all her glory with no spot or wrinkle, holy and blameless. Now, you think the wife's job of submission is difficult? Wow! This is infinitely more difficult. Men, if you're up to the task, this is your task. If you're not, don't get married. But if you're up to that task, or if you're already married, you're already bought into this, your job is to present your wife at the end of her life, at the end of your life, present her to Christ, finished, complete, more like Christ than when you got her. That means all sorts of things. That means that you have to treat her right. That means that you have to encourage her walk with Christ, encourage her devotions, encourage her prayer life, encourage her Bible study. You need to be discipling your wife. Now, yes, there will be other women who will disciple women, but the primary discipler of your wife, men, is you. It must be you. You are to be the primary discipler of your wife. If you're not discipling your wife, if you are a husband, you are married, and you're a man, and you're not discipling your wife, then you've missed the mark. You've missed your calling. Your calling is to disciple your wife first and foremost. You say, well, I've already missed my calling. Now what do I do? You get to it right now. You start right now. But realize, if you're going to disciple her, you better be mature in your faith. If you are not mature in your faith, then you better be being discipled so that you can disciple this woman that God has given to you as a helper and as someone that you are responsible for before Christ. This is a huge responsibility, and I hope you're feeling the weight of it as I am as we study through this, because this is massive, men. This is not something that should be taken lightly, just like going into marriage is not something to be taken lightly. And this is one of the major reasons that going into marriage should not be taken lightly, because your job is to present her complete before Christ. He continues on in verse 28. So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. Here's another example. You've got Christ and the church. Now, this other example is taking care of your body. And most people do that. Now, it's not saying that you have to be the prettiest or the most well-groomed. Right now, I need a haircut, and I haven't gotten to one. Okay, but I still combed my hair. I still washed my face this morning. I still take care of my body. Why? Because I want it to last. I would really like this body to last many more years. And just as we take care of our bodies because we want them to last, we need to take care of our wives because we want our marriages to last. Now, this is not throwing the authority or the responsibility back at the wife, but it's saying, men, you need to love, remember, put this woman first before yourself, just like you would take care of your own body. And for those of you who are not taking care of your own body, first of all, shame on you for not taking care of your own body. That is a part of stewardship that God has given to you, that you need to be taking care of your body. You need to be keeping hygiene. You need to be, doing things like brushing your teeth and such. You need to be bathing regularly. Take care of yourself. Make yourself look respectable because you are in the image of God and you want to reflect respect back to Him. In that same manner, we need to put our wives first, just like we would do that. Just like we would put ourselves before taking care of somebody else's body. He who loves his wife loves himself. That's, again, huge. He's saying, if you don't love your wife, you really don't love yourself. And you say, well, how does that fit? Folks, it goes back to Genesis. Because when you come to be married to your wife, the two become one flesh. If you're not loving the second half of your flesh, then how can you say you're loving yourself? This is not, by the way, an endorsement of the current self-love movement. Not at all. That is not biblical. What he's saying is, since you already love yourself, you need to love your wife. And if you really want a good life, if you really want to take care of yourself and have the best life that you can have, then you better as well, men, love your wife. Because if you don't love your wife, it will reflect back on you, just like we are to reflect back onto God. Husbands also ought to love their own wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. Again, coming back to Christ and the church, but also you take care of your body. Most men that don't have some sort of delusion are taking care of themselves. Now, if you're harming your own body, you've got other issues. But most people, the general person, will take care of their own body. And just like that, we need to take care of our wives. Just like I like to keep my body in shape. I like to keep my body healthy. I'd rather be able to walk and run on my own than have to hobble along or be put in a wheelchair, not because of injury, but because of my own stupidity. And just like that, I need to be caring for my wife just as Christ also does the church. We need to nourish and cherish our wives. Get this, nourish and cherish our wives to the same extent that Christ does the church. Now, how much does Christ nourish the church? He gives us all the power we have. He gives us all the gifts we have. He gives us all the abilities we have to be Christ-like. Way more than we can do for our wives. So we need to be doing everything we can. How much does he care for? Cherish. How much does Christ cherish the church? So much that he died for us. Men, it's not just that, would you take a bullet? But how about in the everyday things that don't require a bullet? Are you still willing to give up your own will, to give her what she needs? This, again, is not just bending to every whim of either one, but this is giving up what you want for what they need. Put your wife first. Just like we are members of Christ's body, your wife is a member of your body because you too are one flesh. You are one before God. Just as you would take care of yourself, you need to take care of that woman that God has given to you. We're going to continue this discussion next week on Freedom Fridays.